What's up, guys? It's time to get radical with our graphs. We are going to graph this radical right now. So I have y equals the square root of x plus 2 minus 1. Now, if I'm looking at this, I can see that this graph has been shifted to the left 2 and down 1, and I'm going to use that as my starting point. Okay? So x equals, x and y. I need at least 3 points to graph here for my x and y. And if I look for my starting point for my x, I'm going to look inside my radical here. And I'm going to look for whatever I can put in for x and get 0 underneath my radical. So if I put in -2 for x there, -2 plus 2 is 0. So my x is -2. And then my y of my starting point is whatever is added or subtracted on the outside. So I have a -1 there on the outside. So my y is -1. And so that's my starting point. So that's a square. Whenever I put -2 in for x, -2 plus 2 is 0. Square root of 0 is 0. Minus 1 is -1. My next perfect square after 0 is 1. And then my next perfect square after 1 is 4. So for my x's, I want to put in for x whatever's going to give me 1 and then 4 underneath my square root. So I'm going to do the square root. And I'm going to think of what I can add to 2 to get 1. Well, if I put in -1 plus 2, -1 plus 2 is 1. The square root of 1 is 1. And so my y is 0. So for an x of -1, I have a y of 0. Then I've got to think of what's going to make 4 underneath my radical, because that's my next perfect square. And if I add 2 to 2, that's going to be the square root of 4. Oops, -1, not +1. Square root of 4 is 2. And so my y is 1. So where x is 2, my y is 1. So again, all I've done for my starting point, I've tried to pick out what I could put in for x to give me 0 underneath the radical. If I put in -2 for x here, -2 plus 2 is 0, so that gives me 0 under the radical. For my next point, I've thought of what could give me my next perfect square after 0, which is 1. 1's a perfect square. And so I put in -1 for x. -1 plus 2 is 1. Square root of 1 is 1. Minus 1 is 0. And then I've thought of what can I put in for x to give me 4 underneath the radical, which is the next perfect square after 1. So if I put in 2 for x, 2 plus 2 gives me 4. Take the square root of 4, which is 2, minus 2 is 1. That's where I got all of those numbers from. Then from here, I'm just going to plot these points. So negative 2, negative 1, negative 1, 0, and 2, 1. And I have enough there then to make my graph. If you want to use the calculator for this, you can. We can just go to our calculator, go to y equals, and clear out what's there. Square root of x plus 2 minus 1. So second, square root x plus 2. Now, if I hit minus 1 right now, it's going to put minus 1 underneath the radical. And as we can see in our function, minus 1 is not underneath the radical right here. So I've got to make sure and press this right arrow to make sure that I'm not underneath the radical anymore. And then I'm going to do minus 1. And so what I have here for y equals square root of x plus 2 minus 1 should look exactly like what's on the page. Radical stops at 2. The radical stops at 2. And then I'm going to hit second table. And I look up and I have some errors, and so my starting point is going to be where those errors stop, which is at negative 2, negative 1, which is what we had on our table. And then I just want the clean looking numbers. I don't want these big long decimal things. So my next one is negative 1, 0. And then I'm going to look for my next clean looking y, which is right there, 2, 1, and that matches up with our table that we made here. So you can use this to make your table as well and plot those 3 points, and you'll have that graphed. You have some practice problems to do. Go ahead and do those now, and thank you very much. We'll see you later.